welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 193, and today's date is October 19th, 2013. And the title of this episode is the Current Economic Collapse News Brief for this Saturday. And what we're seeing out in Italy right now is protesters. They are protesting against austerity, and the crowds are chanting, "We are laying siege to the city." And they are pelting and pushing the police, and the police are pushing back, and they are throwing small bottles and eggs at the government buildings because they are very angry with what is going on. People do not have work. The debt keeps rising. They're cutting people's jobs. They're laying off people. They are cutting programs, and you can push people so far until they can't take it anymore, and that's when people rise up. We see this throughout history, and you can push and push and take and take and take, and eventually people have nothing else to lose, and what they do is they strike out in any way they know how, and that is against those leaders. And again, those leaders never want to give up their position. So what do? They fight back and guard themselves because they don't want to leave what they have. And this is what happens throughout history, and this is the clash, and this is what we are seeing in many, many countries. I mean, right now in Romania, there are major protests because Chevron wants to come in, extract oil and extract gold. People are not happy with this, and there are many, many riots happening right now in Romania also. And we see this all around the world, in different countries. In Greece we saw it, we see it in Spain, and we just every country, Argentina we saw it. And when people are upset and you continually push people and take from the people, people have nothing else to lose, and this is what happens. And very soon you will see this happening in a lot of the other European countries, in the UK, in the United States, and we will definitely see this start to happen and spread across the globe. Now, we talk a lot about surveillance, and I hear a lot of people, saying, "Oh, I have nothing to hide. What's the big deal? They're spying on my emails. They're spying on my texts. It's meaningless. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about." Well, that is kind of false, because you don't realize how many laws are on the books. Actually, there are so many laws, the federal government can't even count how many laws there are. And if they don't know how many there are, how is every individual supposed to know what each law is? And let me give you this is a very simple example. If they are coming after you and you're like, "Well, I did nothing wrong." Let's use for an example, and this is a ridiculous law, but it's on the books. It is a federal crime to be in possession of a lobster under a certain size. So let's say in an email you were telling your friend, and yes, this is an actual law, you have a lobster, doesn't matter if it's dead or alive, and you give the measurement, and they are looking for a way to get you. They will use this against you. Even though you think you did nothing wrong, they still have you. And this is the problem with spying. And there's many, many other laws that are just like this, which seem like, oh, it's no big deal, but they will use it to go after you. So even though you think you're not doing something wrong, you don't know what you're doing because you don't know every single law that's out there. And this is why you do not want to be spied upon, because when the collapse comes and we see that there's a new DHS leader who's been appointed but not yet fully into the position, and once he does get in, this person is going to take DHS to the next level, and that is getting everything in order and everything ready for what is coming. And it looks like this new person is going to be a person that will go after anyone at any time and bring them in or assassinate them or drone strike them if he believes that you are some type of domestic terrorist. And again, they will use these laws and everything that you've been doing against you any way they can, even though you don't think you're doing something wrong. And this is why everyone should be concerned about this spying. And we also have to remember all of this is in complete violation of the Fourth Amendment. But again, the powers that be would like to get rid of the Constitution, and they've been chipping and chipping away at it all this time. Now, out in Syria, we understand that they are dismantling the chemical weapons, and we understand that John Kerry, Susan Rice, President Obama, what they really want is to remove Assad and put in a puppet government to place the U.S. dollar back in there as the reserve currency, and to set up a private Western central bank and to sell their natural resources using the U.S. dollar. We understand this. We also understand that the rebels, which are the paid mercenaries, are fighting against Assad, and they really work for the U.S. Central bankers, Saudi Arabia, who've been funding them, shipping them weapons, and whatnot. Since this peace talk, these rebels, these paid mercenaries, have become very upset. And they are speaking out now, saying that the U.S. and the Gulf states are liars. They are not supporting us anymore. And this is from Abu Muhammad, who says all of them are liars. All of them. I don't know how I can express it better. And we are not hoping anything from them, meaning the U.S. and the Gulf states. Whatever they say, we don't believe it. And what is happening is they are becoming angry because they are left out there, and the support for them is kind of dwindling because of what is going on. Because how do you support the paid mercenaries when the president came out there saying that all we wanted was the chemical weapons to be removed, and it looks like they're contradicting themselves. So what's happening now, there is a warning now, and this is perfect for the false flag event, warning that these terrorist groups, these paid mercenaries that they supported, might turn on their allies because of how angry they are that they just left them with nothing. And, we can see that the Al-Qaeda groups that are out there, the other paid mercenaries, the moderates, whatever they want to call them, are becoming angry. And what they're saying now, the U.S. is warning that these groups might turn on the U.S. And this goes on to say that one of the other Al-Qaeda leaders says the U.S. arms Al-Qaeda and forces the one hand, and on the other sends them to their death. And they were in the past, the U.S., the CIA, and Saudi Arabia were arming the rebels, and on the other hand, they're not helping out with any type of airstrikes that they wanted because they just can't get into Assad. But you have to remember, the U.S. government, central bankers, Saudi Arabia, Israel, they all want Assad removed from office, and they want to put in the puppet regime into Syria. And this will enable them, because Syria and Iran have a treaty with each other, will enable them to go into Iran once Iran or Assad asks for help. Iran comes to Assad's aid, and this gives the green light to start fighting with Iran. And you can see how this is going to play out. Okay. Now the UK is warning about a cyber attack against their power grid, their infrastructure. And this goes on to say a leading security expert whose company holds contracts with the Ministry of Defense has warned that Britain's energy infrastructure is at risk of shutdown from cyber attacks and the actions of foreign owners. And we see this happening in the U.S. We see this happening in Australia. We see this being reported in some of the other European nations, in South Korea. And this is going to be a worldwide type of an event when this hits, because these cyber attacks will hit the power grids, will siphon off the money from the banks, not just here in the U.S. And you can see they're building this up all across the world in many of the private Western central bank countries, and they are definitely getting prepared for what is coming. And we do have to remember that Janet Napolitano, as she was leaving, said not if, but when a cyber attack hits. They already have it planned, and they already slip. It's kind of like they slip up when they start to tell you these things, because their egos get the best of them, and they like to say that they know something and they know that what's coming. And we already know that they've been planning this. They've been building the propaganda for over 2 years now, telling us about the cyber Pearl Harbors, the virtual 9/11s, and a lot of the U.S. leaders were out there. UK is now stepping up with their propaganda. Australia was reporting a lot of cyber attacks using their servers as places where they use them as bouncing the cyber attacks off the servers in Australia. So we can see this happening quite a bit right now, and we understand that this is going to happen very, very soon. And right now, Americans warned of a Kenya mall-style terror attack is imminent in Uganda. Now, the U.S. Embassy in Uganda on Friday warned Americans living in the country of some type of an attack, just like what happened in Kenya. And the intelligence from America show an imminent terror attack is very likely. And you start to wonder, why are they going into Uganda? We understand why they went into Kenya, and they wanted to position the U.S. forces, the Israeli forces, French forces into Kenya, because you have to remember this is all part of the private Western central banks, because Kenya had made a deal with China to become a clearinghouse which would bypass the U.S. dollar, and the U.S. dollar would not be used. And this is why they're positioning themselves in Kenya. And they do this by having terrorist attacks, and which kind of gives them, I don't know, permission to say, oh, we get to go in there now because they're terrorists. Well, the same thing in Uganda is happening, and I started to do a little research, and we see that China is making a deal with Uganda, a $2 billion deal to secure a petroleum field and develop a petroleum field in Uganda and help propel the East African nation into the club of oil-producing countries. And you'll never guess what they're going to bypass. You got it, the U.S. dollar. And now we can see if something happens there and these threats are real, we understand why. Because another country which does not have the private Western Central Bank, which is part of the BRIC nations, is making deals to help these African nations become oil-producing nations, pretty much like the U.S. did with the Mideast during the 70s. It seems like China is following in the footsteps, doing the same thing, making deal with Kenya, making deal with Uganda and other different nations, and setting up many, many deals. And we can see how this is going to turn out. Now, there is an FBI warning, and they're responding to threats to a Midwest water supply system, and they are on high alert right now. And Reuters reports that the FBI and other agencies are in the process of investigating multiple threats to a water system in the Midwest. And these water utilities, if hackers were to take control of the computers that maintain safe water levels and chemical treatment, they could potentially poison the water supply of millions. And the other thing that they're very worried about, if it wasn't some type, or if it was coupled with a cyber attack, this water system could be poisoned with some type of biological agent, and they could, if it's released into the water system, or chemical type of agent, it could really kill millions of people. Actually, this is about 500,000 people that this plant, but if this happens in multiple water systems, this could have the potential disastrous effect of making many people sick or killing many more than 500,000 people. And in the past, hackers have already broken into water utility computer systems recently and made them unsafe. And we can see this happening more and more now. We see that there was a worker out in Arkansas that um, disrupted the electric out there by hitting the power grid. And we understand that there is the threat going on with the water systems. We understand that there is a power grid drill coming up in November. UK is worrying about a hacker attack against their power grid infrastructure. And we see a lot of these warnings coming out because they are getting ready. We also see a lot of glitches happening in many of the systems. And we saw Amazon, we saw Netflix, we saw Vines, we see NASDAQ having many glitches all of a sudden out of the blue, one after another. And we are starting to see this in many different places. And they are just prepping and preparing for something to come. And we know they have this window of opportunity. They understand that they need to get something started because right now they're reporting that the economy is in a decline. Of course, they're blaming it on the government shutdown. The president's out there blaming it on the government shutdown. And we all know from what I've been talking about all along, this has nothing to do with the shutdown. The economy was declining by itself. They were pushing it up during the summer, blowing up bubbles, and now they cannot continue with it. And right now they've been massaging the data, manipulating the data, and we're coming to the end game at this point. And they realize this, and they thought they were going to have this taken care of already with the Syria war, and now the timeline has been pushed back a little bit. And we also have to remember the banks are preparing for a collapse simulation in December, early January, and other countries are using the FDIC Bank of England white paper, which explains how to do the bail-ins and how they can't do the bailouts. And again, Cyprus was a test of this white paper, and now other countries are using this white paper and creating their own to do bail-ins when the system comes crumbling down. And this is when we're going to see bank holidays. We're going to see banks freeze people's accounts. We saw it in Cyprus. Beginning they said, oh, we're only going to take 8%, and they went all the way up to 47%, and they gave them worthless bank stock. And right now, if those people who are listening to me right now, there is a forum that's connected to the x22report.com site. If you go up top, it says The People. It is completely free for everyone. And we do have someone on there, and he lives in Athens. And I just want you to read what he said. And what this forum is actually all about is getting people to talk about things that are happening all around the world so we can understand and not depend on the corporate media of what they're telling us. I like to get firsthand information from people who are actually in that area. And this is Alex in Athens. He lives in Greece, and he says he went to pay his credit card yesterday and discovered that people were leaving the bank very pissed off. It turns out their accounts had been raided. If they owed any back taxes, I guess what happened was the government came in and took the money out of their account. So people will be massively withdrawing the little money they have left next week. And he's saying that people were very angry coming out of the banks. And, we can see what's happening here. And he's saying, and I mentioned this in my other reports, that the IMF is proposing a 10% tax levy of all EU bank accounts. And, you know what's going to happen. If they go ahead with this 10%, and it's probably going to be a lot more than 10%. They might even jack it up to 20% because you have to remember in Cyprus they said it was going to be 8, maybe 11, maybe 15, and went all the way up to 47%. People are going to go to their banks and start withdrawing their money. Now, could this be connected to what Chase and HSBC and plus other banks are going to do about transferring money out of the country, because as time goes on and people get wind of what is going on, they don't want you transferring money out of the U.S. Yeah, you can transfer inside, but who cares about that? The money stays there. So when people start withdrawing and people start getting nervous and, bank runs happen, well, wait a minute. Bank runs collapse, they're having this the end of December. They've been preparing for a bail-in. You don't prepare for these things for just to do it. These things happen for a reason. They create this paperwork for these documents for a reason. They practice for it for a reason. All of this is not a coincidence. All of this is because something is about to happen, and it's going to bring the world to its knees. Listen, everyone, if you haven't prepared, start preparing. If you haven't purchased silver or gold, start doing it. If you haven't taken some money out of the bank, I would start doing it. But these decisions are all yours. I can only tell you what I believe, and it's my opinion of what to do. If you haven't prepared for anything else with food, water, and things like that, I would start preparing. Listen, everyone, be safe, be well, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.